Welcome to Liberty Unlocked. I'm Don Watkins. So, this week I have a really interesting conversation with a really interesting person, Raina Zitelmann, who I had not heard of before he reached out to me. But as you'll see in the conversation, we basically wrote very similar books on multiple occasions and had a deep affinity for an issue that really doesn't get a lot of discussion, which is what is our attitude towards successful, wealthy individuals. And Rainer comes from a much more data-driven background, and I come from a much more philosophic background, but we come to a lot of the same conclusions, including the way in which the wealthy, the successful, are used as scapegoats to push anti-freedom agendas and anti-capitalist agendas. One of the most impactful speeches I ever heard was at an event where I was speaking along with several other people from the Ayn Rand Institute, and my then colleague Onkar Ghate stressed the foundational role of justice for businessmen in the fight for freedom. And part of the way in which you can pursue justice is to help people really understand the contribution of successful individuals, the morality of that success, and the way in which capitalism encourages that kind of success, rewards that kind of success, and then gets rid of the path to wealth that is actually really immoral and damaging, which Ayn Rand called pool peddling. Today it's often called cronyism. But it's the way in which people, instead of creating value, use the government to get value. And part of the reason I wanted to delve into this is because, as I talk about in the interview, one of my great frustrations with the liberty movement is what I think is a real cowardice, that they, instead of actually defending success and wealth, put an overwhelming focus on cronyism, on pool peddling, and in fact treat that as the explanation for most success. And so you'll get people dismissing Walmart or Amazon or any of these companies for some like tiny sliver of a fraction of their success that was owed to some government favor, which is in effect inescapable today, given the way in which government is involved in every aspect of the economy. And I think that unless we can actually take a stand on this issue and defend wealth and achievement, I don't think that there's a real chance for success. I think you need a movement of justice for businessmen. And I think we've seen that particularly in the last few weeks with the way in which the leading businessmen from Silicon Valley were hauled in front of a show trial and basically lectured by a whole bunch of people who've created nothing and want power over everything. So not much more to say about that. I think a lot of the great ideas will come out in the discussion. Highly encourage you guys to follow Raina's work. I think he's just a really interesting guy with a lot of interesting ideas and a lot of surprising commonalities with me. So, as always, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel or subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a review, and I would deeply appreciate that very much. And finally, the best way to stay in contact is, as always, to go to donswriting.com and sign up for the newsletter. Now on to the conversation with Raina Zitelmann. Well, thanks for coming on the show. As I was telling you a few minutes ago, 3 out of 4 of the books that I wrote were really focused on this idea of how our view of businessmen and financially successful people in general impact our views on policy, and specifically our views on capitalism, on inequality, and on finance. And you've done some interesting work that I'm really shocked I didn't know about. Now, granted, the latest book that we're going to talk about, The Rich in Public Opinion, just came out this year. But how did you become interested in this whole question of how society views the wealthy?
Yes, thank you for the question. I wrote my second doctoral thesis a few years ago about the psychology of super rich people. It was, I think it's published now as well with the title The Wealth Elite in the United States, in China and Korea. And so it was, I think, the first book about the personality and psychology of rich people. And so I know a lot of rich people, and I saw that in our society there's a lot of prejudice and stereotypes about rich people. You can see it everywhere. You can see it in movies, you can see it in TV, in newspapers. But now the problem, there are thousands of books about prejudice against black people, against Jewish people, even against overweight people, against poor people, against women, against gay people, and. But there was not one single textbook in-depth analysis of stereotypes and prejudice against this minority of rich people. And for me, rich people are a minority as other minorities. And so I saw there was no research. And what I did first, I read a lot of books about prejudice research, and then I looked what of these methods and results you could adapt to this topic. And the next step, I think we will speak about it. I commissioned a poll in 4 countries, and this was the first time that there was a poll with the same questions in United States, France, Germany, and UK about the thousands of questions about the attitude toward rich people.
And we might delve into them in some detail, but what was kind of your overall takeaway from the poll?
Okay, the differences between different countries. So we asked a lot of questions, and then we could distinguish between 2 groups. I call one group the social envious and the other group the non-envious. Maybe I have to explain it because before I can answer your question. Social envious are people, for example, who agree with statements like this. I have here one statement. When I hear about a millionaire who made a risky business decision and lost a lot of money because of it, I think it serves him right. We call it Schadenfreude. Or I think it would be fair to increase taxes substantially for millionaires, even if I would not benefit from it personally. Or the third one, for only as example, I would favor drastically reducing manager salaries and redistributing the money more evenly among the employees, even if that would mean that the employees would get only a few dollars per month. So, and if people answered, agreed with a lot of statements like this, we saw this was the group of the envious, and then we had another group, the non-envious, and then we calculated something to compare different nations, what we call the social envy coefficient. It is the ratio between envious and non-envious in the country. And so for me, it was very interesting to see that people in France are very envious, then followed by Germany, where I'm living, and then people in United States and in UK are much less envious. But, and this was for me a kind of shock when I saw the difference between younger and older Americans. I knew it before I heard it, that there are a lot of young Americans who love Bernie Sanders or left-wing ideology, and I knew what happened there at university. But in our poll, we saw that there was such an extreme difference between the young and the old Americans. The older Americans, so in my age, 60 plus, they are similar how we think in Europe about Americans: skeptical to the state, skeptical against taxes, positive to entrepreneurship, and. And for the young people, it was absolutely the contrary. And this was only in the United States. Today I got this book will be published in Italy. And so now I made another poll with the same questions in Italy. And for example, in Italy, it's the other way around. Young people are very positive toward rich people, and the older Italians are the same as the younger Americans. So these are some things that were very and for United States, I'm really a little bit shocked, and maybe I can ask you a question for this. What is it only the result of what happens there at the university and so on? What is the reason? I have some ideas, but you live in America. I live here in Germany. What do you think? What is the reason that so many young Americans have this anti-rich attitude?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I mean, one thing that makes it difficult to answer, and this is so revealing about what your results turned out to be, is the very fact that you had to do this poll and that we don't have a similar rigorous take on the trend in attitudes towards the wealthy going back in time. The fact that we're, late into the not late, but we're well into the 21st century. And I don't know, 50 years ago exactly what those ratios have been, but the one thing that jumps out to me is that at colleges certainly, but for at least the last, let's call it, 15 years roughly, there's been kind of a relentless storm of what I wrote about in my third book with Yaron Brook, The Equal is Unfair. We talked about how there had been this narrative structured that was saying that all of the problems in America today are the result of rising inequality. And of course, inequality, depending on how you measure it, but by most measures, income inequality anyway, has risen significantly, arguably since the 70s, but at least since the 90s. And since there are a lot of problems, and since this narrative could become very plausible, well, now we have a set of bad guys who are causing everything bad, which are the wealthy. And so I think this view of inequality as a problem has been more long-standing in Europe. And I think here it was just pushed so hard that is at least one element that I've seen a noticeable change in the ideas that are fed to younger people, where they've been through a lot of negative things. I mean, I grew up mostly during the 90s. And so in my life as a 90s American, war wasn't really a thing. Recessions were barely a thing. Like, life was mostly good, stable, and peaceful. But then for the people who followed me, they grew up in the world of 9/11, the world of the 2008 recession, the world of now, COVID-19. And so I think there's this sense that we live in a really terrifying time, and the only narrative that they've heard is that it's the cause is capitalism and the inequality created by the most successful people under capitalism.
Yes, I think the financial crisis is especially a very important thing, because think about someone who's student, maybe he's now 25, 27. His first political experience was, maybe he was 15, then you start usually to be aware what happens. And his first experience was financial crisis with Lehman bankruptcy and so on. And the interpretation that he can hear every day in university, media, and from politicians is that this was caused by neoliberalism, by deregulation, by capitalism. I don't think so. I wrote a book, The Power of Capitalism, and I have a chapter where I show that, on the contrary, it was a result of the crazy policy of the Federal Reserve, and this was about political regulation that forced financial institutions to give loans to people who should never give them loans. And all this, I think you know that there are other reasons, but this is what I know. But I think the most common interpretation is that this is a crisis of capitalism, and this is what they grew up with. Yes, but in Europe, it's the other way around. For example, to come back to our poll, in Germany and in France, younger people are a little bit more in favor of rich people than older one. The difference is not so big, but it's the other way around. And in Italy, what I told you about, it's extreme. It's so it's only in the United States where you have this. So this was one interesting result. And another interesting thing was we had not only this poll for the book, but we had one chapter, I think you saw it, it's an analysis of Hollywood movies.
I was so happy you updated this, because there was some study, and I don't know how good it was, that was done that I cited in my first book about how the majority of murders, and maybe crimes, but at least murders on TV, were committed by businessmen, which is so revealing, because if you actually look at the statistics of who commits murders, it's mostly not businessmen, it's mostly not the wealthy. And the fact that was the portrayal, but it was a statistic, I think, from the early, like 2006, and nobody's looked into that, as far as I know, in a long time. And so what did you find?
Yes, it was, I think we looked at more than 500 Hollywood movies, but in the end, we could have only an in-depth analysis of 43 Hollywood movies with a code book and all the things you can use. And there we saw that the rich people, on the one hand, they were portrayed as intelligent, but on the other hand, as morally bad people. And we compared it with what we called non-rich counterparts. I give you one example. I think most of your audience will know this Pretty Woman, this movie with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. And he's in the beginning of the film, he's a very bad guy, a raider, and with bad business practices and so. And she, in spite of the fact that she's a prostitute, she's in a way better as a person portrayed in this film. But in the end, in this film, he changes. Yeah, she makes him a better man. And you have, if we compared it, and in most cases, rich people were portrayed in a very negative way. And what's for me important, this book was for me only a beginning. For example, I wanted to make an analysis of other media like TV or newspapers, but I could do it only for one nation, this for Germany, because so the book has 550 pages and I couldn't write a book with 1,000 pages. But this is only the first thing, and I hope that there should be much more research in these topics, and this is something I'm a little bit critical against the libertarian community. They always tell you about their own theories. Oh, here, read this book from Ludwig von Mises and from Hayek and Milton Friedman. It's all great. I love them. But these are books sometimes 100-year old. Yes, and for example, I wrote 30 years ago a book where I showed that Hitler was much more socialist with anti-capitalist idea than before. It was my first doctoral thesis. And some days ago, I spoke with one publisher in the United States. They publish books on a non-profit basis. I don't want to earn money with this, but the book was available in the United States, but it's out of print since 10 years. And I asked them whether they like to print it. No, we do only the classic libertarian authors and so on. This is something that I criticize. You have to, if you tell me there's no single analysis of, for example, how business, you did some analysis, I'm very look forward to read it, but that there's no other analysis about how rich people are or businessmen are portrayed in TV or in the media. I think there's a lot of things to do, and I wanted to, with this book, I wanted to give only a starting point for a lot of more research.
Why do you think that is, that amongst people who are pro-liberty, we have not been more, let's call it, relevant and up to date? Because I think certainly in the US, over the last 4 or 5 years, I think conservatives who are genuinely free market, not just the ones who cite it, and then libertarians have been virtually, it's not fair to call it silent, but they've been sort of irrelevant to the debate. And it's not like there's been this big outpouring of really relevant research that along the lines of what you're talking about.
Yes, and this is the one thing with research, but what is much more important, you have to have simple messages that can be understood by more people, not about complicated theories and so, but a lot of them, they don't understand anything about PR, public relation, and I think it is so important. You can have the fascinating studies and research if you don't know enough about public relation and how to spread this with easy messages to the people. It's without worth, and I don't know. I don't know what is the reason. For example, I wrote another book I can recommend here about, I don't know whether you know it, it's, you can speak about maybe next time, The Power of Capitalism. And this was also something that was missing. It was, I compared different, for example, China in Mao's time and China today, North, South Korea, East, West Germany, Chile, Venezuela, or Sweden in the socialist time and after this. And this is real facts. It's a book without any theory. You don't find theory. You find only facts, because this is a problem with leftist people. They like to compare a utopia or a theory that they write in the book with reality. And I think it's unfair. It's the same as if you, for example, I would compare your marriage with your wife maybe with a Romans love book or something like this, where people kiss every yes, and then your wife comes one evening and tells you, we have to divorce because I read this book and so it's all perfect, and in our marriage it's not. You would tell her it's crazy. Please can compare our marriage with those of our friends and not with a book. But
well, I think people really do that. I mean, I think they do that about marriage, but certainly you're right about, in effect, holding freedom to the standard of living up to a fantasy utopia versus how does it compare to all the other alternatives. In fact, what you cited, doing these contrasting studies. When did you publish your book?
The Power of Capitalism.
The Power of Capitalism.
2 years ago, yes. And
you're breaking my heart, because I tried to do the same thing just as a few chapters in a book that I published in 2016, and I'm not a researcher, so I'm having to pull from what already exists and had to, read biographies and all kinds of histories and try to piece something together. And I literally remember having the feeling, how has somebody not done this for me and handed it on a platter so I can popularize it?
But it's great to hear that you've done it. And my book is translated now in some languages. I discuss it in Italy. I was in South Korea. It was #1 for nonfiction books there. And people are interested in this stuff because it's without any theory in my book. You don't find, you only find facts. And I think, for example, if someone tells me, there's a theory, Ludwig von Mises, he explained why socialism can't work. It's a great book, really great. I admire it, but it's exactly 100 years ago that he wrote this book. And now it's 100 years later, and you don't have to discuss about theory so much. You have to discuss what happened in society. But maybe let's come back for a moment to this book about the rich in public opinion. I think what is very important is the mechanism of scapegoating. Yes, you see it in every crisis in history. People looked for scapegoats, especially if they don't understood some developments. It was in the Middle Ages, for example, when there was a disease or when there was a disaster, and then they blamed witches, like, for example, in Europe, 40,000, 60,000 women were killed as witches, or they blamed Jewish people very often. They poisoned the well and all this crazy stuff. And this happens again and again, that people look for scapegoats. And you saw it the last time in the financial crisis. And I have there are some pages about this, that they blamed greedy bankers. They told greedy bankers, because for the people, it's they need something like a group, like a minority. And this is what we know from history. And when I discussed about this topic, the rich as a minority, people criticized me and told me, no, but rich people, they shouldn't, they have a good life, they have a great life, they live luxury. Why should we care about stereotypes, prejudice? And I told them, don't forget, words can become deeds. And this happened very often in history. I don't know whether you know this great book. It's one of my favorite books by George Gilder. I don't know how you pronounce it in English. George Gilder, Wealth and Poverty. And he has one page there. One page is so important in this book. And he writes, there's a not written history about when rich people were killed in so many situations in history, not only the so-called Kuliks in the Russian Revolution, but it was in Cambodia, it was in the Chinese Revolution, but there are a lot of other cases. And so my book is a scientific book, but on the other hand, it's like a warning signal for rich people. Now it's only words, but it's really shocking. For example, this was because you asked what was the reason why you wrote this book. I tell you experience that I had here in Germany. There were demonstrations from leftist people and they had posters with slogan, "Kill your landlord." So it was "Kill your landlord." And they had posters for to advertise the demonstration, and they were with a guillotine. And beside the guillotine was written, "Against the city of the rich." And as a thought experiment, I thought, what would happen if there's a rally or a demonstration, and with posters like "Kill Muslims," for example, or "Kill black people," or "Kill Jewish people." Everyone would be outraged, rightly outraged. You can't imagine that something happens like this. But if it is about rich people, everything is allowed. We had here in one of the most or the most important German news magazines, it's like maybe Time or so in the United States, and we had a big article with a headline, "To hell with the rich," for example. And at the same time, thought experiment, imagine there's an article or an op-ed with a headline, "To hell with Muslims," or "To hell with black people." Everyone would be outraged, but the rich people are the only minority where it's allowed to say so very aggressive negative things. With other minorities, we are very, very sensible, sometimes hypersensible. If you say anything what couldn't maybe not politically correct, there's really a shitstorm. But with rich people, it's the contrary. And so I thought it's interesting to have research. What is the reason for this? And for me, it's the scapegoating is one reason. You saw it again in the coronavirus crisis now. I don't know how it is in the United States, but we had it in Europe, a lot of rallies where Bill Gates was blamed. Bill Gates, he made the coronavirus. He wanted to make more billions with a vaccine against it. It's absolutely crazy. On the other hand, he did a lot more than every other man in history did in fight against poverty and disease. But because he's rich, they made him the scapegoat. And this happens very often in history, that if there are negative developments and people can't explain it. It's the greedy bankers, it's the super rich rich people, and so, and this is the same as you have very often with minorities. But then there's another interesting thing. We had one question in that we asked in Germany, and we asked people who know a millionaire in person. Most people, they don't know.
I'm happy you brought this up, because this was so interesting and revealing to me when I saw this in your work.
Yes, because to explain it, so most people, they don't know a millionaire in person, but they're sure there are some who know one. And then we asked, first we asked the general population about personality traits of rich people. And they mentioned greedy and ruthless and superficial and what mostly negative personality traits. And then we asked only this little group of people who know a millionaire in person. And it was exactly the other way around. They said he's industrious, he's intelligent, he's optimistic. And so you see, it has something to do. If people don't know them, we know generally from the prejudice research that sometimes if people don't have personal contact, then they have their own fantasies, their stereotypes. It's sometimes influenced by the media, but it's not only by the media. I think it's something I called it the compensation theory. And what I mean with this, for example, imagine there's someone who's better than you are in life. Maybe he has, I say, 3+ points, and then people want to give him, on the other hand, 4- points to feel better. It's important for their self-confidence. You have it not only with rich people. For example, sometimes they say about pretty woman, yes, she's pretty, but I think she's not so intelligent, because what is crazy, yes, but I think people believe, they have this belief system that all people are absolutely equal. And if someone is better, then he should be worse in another aspect. What is crazy? There's no evidence for this. And so this is one reason I call it the compensation theory, why a lot of people, for example, we had one question. This was a statement. We confronted people with a statement: rich people are good in earning money, but usually they are no decent people. And there were a lot of people, especially young people, who agreed with the statement. But there was as well the difference. I think it was 40% of young people, when I have it correct in mind, who agreed with the statement. Only 23% disagreed. And with older people, so 60+, it was the other way around. Only 15% agreed and 50% disagreed. And I spoke about this before, that we have this age difference.
So I think part of what you said just touched on this, but I think it's interesting that why they're such an easy group to scapegoat, and why they're treated differently than other groups. And what's your take on that?
I will speak about one aspect. I think there are different aspects to answer this question, but one thing that is really important for me, I think partly it's the fault of rich people, because all other minorities, they have learned to stand their ground and then improve their situation. I give you one example: gay people, for example. Look what was their situation 50 years ago, and look what's their situation now. It's a huge difference. In Germany, for example, we had here a mayor in Berlin, and he had a statement, "I'm proud to be gay," for example. Yes, it was in Berlin, our mayor. You couldn't imagine this happened 50 years ago or something like this. But the reason was because a lot of minorities had learned they have learned that they have to do something for themselves to to do something against the prejudice and stereotypes. But this is what I criticize with rich people. They don't do it. Yes, they don't they take no part in the discussion. They are silent. They are defensive. And for example, this poll that I commissioned, it was very expensive, and this other analysis, it was like $130,000. I'm rich myself, so I could afford it. Yes, I could finance it with my own money. But usually for other scientists, it would not be possible. And I tried to find rich people, for example, to support something. I had the idea of an institute for academic wealth research or something where we can have more studies like this. But no one wanted to give money for this. And so I think maybe in the United States it's a little bit better because you have some of these libertarian think tanks like Cato and Heritage and Atlas Foundation. But in Germany we don't have it. And I think this is a real problem that when rich people are attacked, they don't go in counter attack, and they don't explain why, for example, why they are so important. I had an interview a few weeks ago with a journalist, and he asked me, do you really think that we need super rich people? Why do we need super rich people? And I told them, I can tell you something. Do we need successful entrepreneurs? Because this is the same question. Because if you look at the Forbes list of the wealthiest people in the world are Americans, these are all entrepreneurs. Or if they are not entrepreneurs, they are heirs from entrepreneurs. Look at someone like Jeff Bezos with Amazon, like Bill Gates with Microsoft, or Larry Page, Sergey Brin with Google, or Zuckerberg with Facebook, or Elon Musk with his company. So they all became rich as entrepreneurs. And if you ask about this crazy question, why do we need super rich people? It's the same as if you would ask, why do we need entrepreneurs? Because most of them became rich as entrepreneurs. And another fact that people don't understand, sometimes they tell you, yes, okay, maybe in the past, in the good old times, 50 years ago, you could get rich self-made, but today it's not possible. It's only an exception, and this is not true. I tell you one other fact that a lot of people don't know. You know, there's every year this Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans, and Forbes has an analysis always about the percentage that is self-made, or how they call it is silver spoon. And in 1984, 48% were self-made, 48%. Today, 67% are self-made. So it's crazy if people tell you, oh, in former times it was possible. Now, on the contrary, today it's better as ever before. You see all these people that I mentioned before, they're all self-made. Warren Buffett self-made, Bill Gates self-made, Jeff Bezos self-made, Larry Brin self-made, Zuckerberg self-made, Elon Musk self-made. They're not no heirs, they are self-made. And I think, so there are a lot of facts that what you can tell people, but the rich people, they don't do it. Yes, they don't engage in this discussion. They are silent, and in a way, sometimes, okay, they are not so good with writing and speaking because this is maybe not their talent. But then they should support maybe people like you and me who do this, who can do this research. And so your question is why is the situation so bad? And I say partly it's the fault of the rich people.
I think there's definitely some truth to that, a lot of truth to that. One thing you said in passing was, noting that maybe the situation is slightly better in the U.S. where we have lot of free market think tanks who are quite visible. But one of the things that's really troubled me is that I've noticed that a lot of these pro-liberty people, they love it whenever they have an opportunity to attack business or attack the rich, and in effect say that freedom doesn't mean I'm pro-business people. Freedom doesn't mean I'm pro people with fortunes, because maybe they got like Walmart, which I think overall has created an enormous amount of wealth through the free market. They love blaming Walmart and saying, oh, well, they got some zoning favors or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's I don't want to mention now what it is, but it was an important libertarian think tank, and I sent them the book where we speak about now. And he told, no, rich people, look all this bailouts and this Wall Street, and look what Bill Gates did and so. And I think because they are always attacked by leftist people that they are pro-rich and so on, then they want to show, no, I'm not, I'm very against the rich. So you see this virus, yes, this anti-rich virus is in the middle as well of this libertarian community. And this is the real problem. The problem is not that there are very left-wing people who are against rich people, but because they are always attacked. And this is another thing. I think this anti-rich, it's like a religion for intellectuals. I have one chapter in my other book that I mentioned, The Power of Capitalism, and the headline of the chapter is Why Intellectuals Don't Like Capitalism. This chapter was praised in a lot of reviews. And one explanation is because intellectuals, they don't understand how people and why people become rich. Even it's not only about leftist intellectuals. You can see it as well with right-wing intellectuals, that they are anti-business and anti-rich, and it has something to do with a competition between elites, and it's a little bit complicated, but maybe I can explain it for a few minutes. In my book about the wealth elite, I had this theory, implicit and explicit learning. And this is very important. Explicit learning is book wisdom, what you learn at school or university. Implicit learning is more street smart learning by doing. And usually entrepreneur, they have not this book wisdom. Sometimes they have not academic degree, and sometimes they even have no high school degree and so. But they have another kind of wisdom. We call it implicit knowledge, or you can call it as well intuition or gut feeling. And this is very important for their success. But academics and intellectuals, they don't understand it. For them, only those people who read a lot of books, they should be on the top of the society. And they learn every day that there's someone who read only a few books, or maybe has no high school degree and nothing, and he has, but maybe in the end, the bigger house, the nicer car, and the prettier woman, and so. And then he thinks the world is crazy, and there is something wrong with the market, because if everything would be right, he should be in this position. And so I think it has something to do with the intellectuals and what we spoke about, even libertarian research, and so there are, in a way, they are intellectuals, and so some of them have also this anti-rich sentiment, and this was very important for me that you mentioned this, because it's not only a problem of leftist people.
No, absolutely. I like, by the way, that you called it implicit learning, because I think, entrepreneurs will often talk about gut feel, but that makes it sound innate. Whereas usually what was happening was they were going out into the world and engaging in commerce in some form from a very young age, and developing a lot of pattern recognition, a lot of experience that they were drawing lessons from. And that is part of what it meant that they were earning the fortune they eventually created.
Absolutely. This was one result. In my second doctoral dissertation, I mentioned it before. You can read it as a book as well. The title is The Wealth Elite. And I conducted interviews with 45 very rich people. Most of them had between 30 million and 1 billion euro net worth, and they were self-made. And I asked every one of them, what is more important for them, analysis on the one hand, or maybe what you call a gut feeling? And most, sure, we use both, but most of them answered gut feeling. But, and this is important, what you said, gut feeling, it's nothing irrational or mystical or so. Absolutely wrong. Gut feeling, it's a result of implicit learning, that the result is implicit knowledge, exactly as you mentioned it, some patterns. And you have to understand this theory of, we have it from Hayek and Polanyi, from implicit learning, and implicit knowledge is not my theory. And I saw it. I asked the super rich people, for example, about how they were at school and university. And there were some with good grades, some with bad grades. But to make it short, there was absolutely no correlation between their financial success on the one hand and their performance at school or university on the other hand. But then I asked them, what did you do alongside school or outside school? And for example, half of them were competitive athletes. This was very important, to learn how to win, but much more important, to learn how to lose and all this. They learned a lot of things in this way of implicit learning as competitive athletes. And a lot of them made very early entrepreneurial experience. They sold so many different things. They had so many experience.
Right.
That they did it at school, sometimes with 15 or 16 years, maybe to sell used cars or insurance policies or real estate products or whatever. So many things that they sold. And these experience that they made in their youth, this was the foundation for their success later, not what they learned at university. Even, for example, this was another result of this analysis, that sales is very important to become successful as an entrepreneur. But I don't know how it is in the United States, but in Germany, if you study MBA, economy, you don't learn anything about sales. You learn only about, algorithm and any statistics and it's abstract theories. But this doesn't help anyone later in life if he gets entrepreneur. What you should learn is how to sell. And these people, no one learned it at university. And now, what is my point of view? That intellectuals don't understand that there's an alternative way to learn, that there's another form of wisdom that is as important as it is book wisdom. They understand only book wisdom. And if they see someone like very rich man and he see, oh, he's not so educated, I read 3,000 books and he maybe only 10 books, and so then they are a little bit arrogant with their nose up, and they say, this is no justice. You see how bad is the market, how bad is capitalist society, that he has so much money and I not. That is this frustration of intellectuals.
Well, Ryan, I could do this all day, but unfortunately I am out of time. Where can people find out more about your work, and particularly this book, which I highly recommend to everybody who's interested in freedom and just interested in understanding the day-to-day culture that we live in? Because I think this perspective really saturates everything from the news to, as we talked about, entertainment. So to even people's attitude towards their bosses. So where's the best place for people to go?
Yes, go to Amazon. You can order it by Amazon, and if you Google my name, you find as well a website in English language with a lot of articles about different subjects. But go to Amazon, and if you read this book, please make a review with Amazon. This is very important because I had, this was a little bit problem. My book was published in the, everyone was only interested in coronavirus
Oh
problem.
no.
And so this was, yes, even it was delayed for this reason. And I have a lot to do in the United States because it's very important for me that people know more about this. I'm very often in Asia, in South Korea, or even in China. And in China, you think about what it's, I don't like the political system there, but what I like this people in Asia, they are much more hungry. For example, when I have their interviews, I have a lot of interviews there with media. No one asks me, is it a good idea to become rich or critical? No, everyone want to get rich. This is maybe, it's their religion. And for example, I tell you something, I was in January before, it was some weeks before this coronavirus spread more and more. I was in Shenzhen, at the university. It was a little university with only 1,000 students, but I had my lecture Friday late evening. Late in the evening, I had my lecture, and there were 850 from this 1,000 students were there. If I would do it in Germany, Friday late night, to speak about how to become rich and so, and people are so fascinated. And this is what I love with Chinese people. And if you speak with them about Karl Marx and so, I think you find much more Marxists in United States and in Germany as in China. They laugh about it. And it's crazy with Karl Marx. I found no one when I discussed it. I'm sure they have his books there and with Mao, but no one believes in Karl Marx. People there, I had a discussion with one professor. He was for a couple of years in Chicago, and he told me, maybe we will be the last defender of capitalism.
That's great. Well, good luck with the book, and good luck with everything you're working on. And I look forward to sending you my stuff, because I think you'll be surprised at how much we resonate on a lot of these themes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I will order your books, and maybe we can have another conversation. If you read my book about Power of Capitalism or the Wealth Elite, we can have another interview about this. I appreciate very much, and thank you for your time.
All right. Take care.